At our anniversary dinner, I paid the bill. Returning, I heard someone ask my wife, "Does he still believe you love him?" She smirked. "His credit score is flawless, and I have unlimited shopping privileges. Why leave?" I silently finished my drink and drove home. 2 days later, she screamed when all her cards were declined and begging to reconcile. This happened over several years and finally concluded a few months ago. A quick note before I start, I created this throwaway account because my main has identifying info. Some small details changed for privacy, but the core story is 100% true. Also, this is long as hell, so buckle up. I guess I should give you guys some background first, so this all makes sense. I grew up in a blue-collar family in Michigan, about an hour outside Detroit. My dad worked at the same factory for 32 years making car parts, and my mom did admin work at a local insurance office. We weren't poor exactly, but definitely not well off either. Vacations meant camping at state parks. Christmas gifts were practical stuff we needed anyway, and college wasn't really on the table unless I got some miracle scholarship. After high school, while my friends were heading off to community college or state schools, I went into plumbing. My uncle knew a guy named Dave who ran a decent-sized plumbing business, and he took me on as an apprentice. Started at $12.50 an hour, which felt like decent money to 18-year-old me, who'd been making minimum wage stocking shelves at Meijer during high school. The first few years were rough, not gonna lie. Crawling under houses in the Michigan winter, dealing with other people's literal shit, getting yelled at by Dave when I messed up pipe fittings. But I stuck with it because I could see the older guys making solid money, especially the ones who specialized in high-end work. By 26, I had my journeyman license, and by 28, I passed the master plumber exam. That was a huge deal for me. First person in my family to get any kind of professional certification. I started taking side jobs on weekends and evenings, stashing away as much cash as I could. My parents thought I was crazy working 70+ hours a week, but I had this vision, you know? At 30, I took the plunge and quit working for Dave to start my own business. First year was absolute hell. I was living in a basement apartment that cost $750 a month, driving a '99 Ford F-150 with 237,000 miles on it that leaked oil everywhere. The truck had a cracked dashboard. The heat only worked when it felt like it, and the rust holes in the floorboard meant I could literally see the road under my feet sometimes. But it ran, and it could haul pipe and tools, so it did the job. I ate a lot of ramen and peanut butter sandwiches that year. There were months I had to choose between paying my cell phone bill, needed for work calls, and buying new work boots when mine got holes in them. I patched those boots with duct tape for 2 extra months until I landed a decent commercial job that gave me enough cushion to splurge on new Red Wings. But slowly things improved. I specialized in high-end bathroom and kitchen remodels, the kind with heated floors, digital shower systems, and fancy fixtures that cost more than my monthly rent. Turns out rich people will pay serious money to make their bathrooms feel like spas, and they don't haggle much over price if you present yourself well and do quality work. By the time I was 32, I had hired 2 other plumbers and was clearing about $85,000 a year in profit after expenses. Not fuck you money by any means, but a hell of a lot better than where I started. I even upgraded to a 2010 truck and moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in a nicer area. Still furnished mostly from IKEA and Facebook Marketplace, but it had actual windows and didn't smell like my downstairs neighbor's cats. That's when I met Sarah. She was 27, working at this fancy home decor boutique that catered to rich people in Birmingham, local super wealthy suburb. I was doing a bathroom remodel for the boutique's owner, and Sarah was there helping with some design consultation or whatever. First time I saw her, I literally almost dropped a pipe fitting. She was gorgeous, tall, blonde, green eyes, that put-together look that says, "I've never set foot in a Walmart." Way out of my league, I thought. But for some reason, she seemed interested in me. Kept coming by the job site to check on progress. Asked questions about my work. Laughed at my dumb jokes. When I finished the job, she slipped me her number on this fancy little business card with her personal cell scribbled on the back. I nearly crashed my truck staring at it on the way home, wondering if this was some kind of joke. Our first date was at this pizza place called Marco's. Nothing fancy, but it was the best I could afford without looking desperately broke. To my surprise, she didn't seem to mind. Actually talked about how refreshing it was to meet a real man who works with his hands. Said she was tired of the trust fund boys. Her parents were always pushing her to date. I ate that shit up like candy, feeling all special and authentic or whatever. Over appetizers, I learned her backstory. Dad was an executive at one of the auto parts manufacturers. Mom didn't work but sat on like 3 different charity boards. They lived in Bloomfield Hills. If you're not from Michigan, that's basically where all the auto executives and old money live in massive houses. She went to some private college out east, got an art history degree, and was working at the boutique as her starter career, while she built connections in the design world. She mentioned an ex, some dermatologist who just wasn't ambitious enough. That should have been my first red flag. How the hell is a doctor not ambitious enough? But I was too busy staring at her to process the warning sign. I was honest about my background, figuring she'd lose interest once she realized I was just a blue-collar guy from a nobody family. Instead, she seemed fascinated, asking all these questions about how I started my business, what my plans were for expanding it, how much potential the high-end market had. Looking back, it was less like a date and more like a business evaluation, but I was too smitten to notice. 6 months in, things got serious. I was working my ass off, building the business. She'd come over to my apartment, always bringing something to improve the place. Fancy coffee, new sheets, art for the walls. I thought it was sweet. Now I realized she was just embarrassed by how I lived and was trying to upgrade me piece by piece. The first time I went to her place, she had a condo her parents helped her buy. I felt like I was in a magazine. Everything matched, everything was brand name, everything looked effortless, but probably cost a fortune. She made some comment about how, "We could totally do this for your place too," and I nodded like an idiot, not realizing I was being slowly molded into whatever she thought I should be. Then came dinner with her parents at their house in Bloomfield Hills. Their casual family home was 6,500 square feet with a pool, tennis court, and a garage with more cars than my entire apartment building had. Her dad, Richard, wore the kind of casual clothes that look regular, but probably cost more than all the furniture I owned. During dinner, Richard asked about my long-term business strategy and scalability potential, while her mom, Catherine, kept making comments about Sarah's cousin who just made partner at Goldman, and her friend's daughter who married that wonderful surgeon from Grosse Pointe. Every comment felt like a subtle way of saying I wasn't good enough. After dinner, Richard took me to his office. Wood-paneled walls, leather chairs, the whole rich guy setup. Asked straight up about my income, debt, and credit score. Said he was just looking out for his princess. Like an idiot, I showed him everything, thinking I'd impress him with how I'd built something from nothing. He nodded, looking disappointed, then said, "Well, there's potential here, I suppose." I felt like I was being assessed as a business prospect, rather than as a potential son-in-law. When I proposed 4 months later, yes, quick, but business was doing well and I was head over heels, Sarah seemed genuinely happy. Her parents less so. The wedding was small. My family and a bunch of friends from the trades on one side, her much smaller, curated guest list on the other. Her college roommate Madison was maid of honor. This fake nice type who kept talking about Sarah finally settling down, with weird emphasis on settling. My buddy Mike, who'd been working for me since I started the company, was my best man. He pulled me aside during the reception and said, "You sure about this, man? Something feels off." I brushed him off, assuming he was just being overprotective. Biggest mistake of my life. After the honeymoon, which her parents paid for, making sure I knew it was because they wanted Sarah to have the experience she deserves, things changed. First, Sarah quit her job at the boutique, said she wanted to support my business growth and network with potential clients. In practice, this meant spending my money joining country clubs and attending charity events where she'd introduce me as my husband, the contractor, with this weird apologetic smile. Or worse, she'd say, "Jake's company handles luxury plumbing installations," like she was trying to make it sound fancier than it was. She'd drag me to these events where everyone was a lawyer, doctor, finance bro, or lived off family money. I'd stand there in my nice but not designer clothes while these guys talked about their vacation homes and private school tuitions. Sarah would jump in with, "We're looking at property in northern Michigan," or "Jake's business is really taking off," things we'd never actually discussed. The pressure to keep up began almost immediately. It started small. "Honey, you can't drive that truck to client meetings. What will they think? Let's get you something nicer. We should look at houses in Birmingham. Nobody takes you seriously living in Sterling Heights. That watch looks so basic. Let me get you something better for your birthday." Each comment came with a price tag. New truck, $65,000 for a top trim F-250 that she insisted reflected my success better. House in Birmingham, $4,200 per month rent for a place 3 times bigger than we needed. Watch, $7,500 for something Swiss that I was terrified to wear while actually working with my hands. Business was growing, so I justified it all as investment in my brand. But my margins were getting thinner with each necessary upgrade. I was making more than ever, clearing almost $150,000 personally that first year of marriage. but somehow had less actual money available than when I was making $85,000. Meanwhile, Sarah's spending was out of control. $900 salon visits every few weeks, $5,000 shopping trips with Madison, $12,000 for a business trip to New York that seemed to involve mostly spas and restaurants with her college friends. When I mentioned maybe cutting back, she'd get this cold look and say, "I thought you wanted to be successful. This is how successful people live." About 18 months in, I had to take out a business loan to cover payroll during a slow month. Called my sister Jen in a panic, and she offered to loan me money instead. When I told Sarah about the cash flow issue, she suggested I talk to Daddy about investing in the business, as if I wanted her father as a business partner, looking over my shoulder and judging every decision. Jen hated Sarah from day one. "She treats you like an ATM, not a husband," she told me after a particularly tense Thanksgiving, where Sarah made fun of our family's traditions and quaint little house. I brushed it off as family tension, but deep down, the doubt was growing. By year 3, things got worse. I'd hired more guys, expanded the business to include more general contracting work, and our revenue was way up. But Sarah's expectations grew even faster. Now it was, "We should really be in a country club. The Bloomfield Hills one, not the cheaper one in Royal Oak. Everyone's going to Aspen this winter. We need to book a chalet. Your suits are off the rack. You need proper tailoring if you're meeting with these developers." I was working 70+ hours a week again. Not because the business needed it, I had good people, but because we needed the money to fund this lifestyle. I was getting jobs I never would have landed before, partly due to Sarah's connections, but the pressure was crushing me. Mike, who'd been with me since the beginning and was now my site manager, started noticing. "Dude, you look like shit all the time. What's going on? The business is doing great, but you're miserable." He was right. We were doing $1.8 million in revenue, but I was more stressed than when I was broke. I started noticing other things too. How Sarah would be super affectionate right after I landed a big contract, but cold and distant if a job fell through. How she'd light up talking to her friends' husbands, who made more than me, but look bored when my work buddies and their wives came over. Then there were the girls' weekends that seemed to happen whenever I mentioned budget concerns. She'd disappear to Chicago or Toronto with Madison, come back refreshed and with shopping bags from stores where belts cost more than my first car. 4 years in, I overheard a phone call. Sarah thought I was at a job site, but I'd come home early with a migraine. She was in the home office, door partially open. "No, it's fine. The business is doing really well now. Yes, almost 2 million gross last year." "No, he's completely clueless. Of course I'm still going to Chicago next weekend. He thinks it's with you girls." "Don't worry. Steven understands my situation. 2 more years and it won't matter anyway." I froze outside the door, heart pounding. She hung up shortly after, and I sneaked back out and drove around for an hour before coming home normally. I told myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe Steven was a client or business contact, but the seed was planted. Fast forward to our 5th anniversary. Sarah insisted on this pretentious French restaurant where entrees start at $75. I wanted to go back to Marco's where we had our first date, but she literally laughed in my face. "God, Jake, nobody celebrates anniversaries at pizza joints. What are we, college students?" Besides, Claude's is where the Hendersons are having their anniversary too, and he might be interested in having your company bid on their new lake house project. Business was booming. I had 12 employees, commercial contracts, and was on track to clear $450K in profit that year. But cash flow was always tight because of our lifestyle requirements. I'd recently had to explain to my guys that the new health insurance plan I promised would be delayed by a quarter. Meanwhile, Sarah had just spent $23,000 renovating her closet. At dinner, Sarah was extra affectionate, touching my arm, laughing at my jokes, actually asking about my day. Probably because I just landed a $1.2 million contract renovating bathrooms for a hotel chain. When the $680 check came, I went to pay at the counter. Habit from when my card got skimmed once at a restaurant. On my way back, I passed behind a decorative wall where Sarah was sitting with Madison, who'd coincidentally been dining there with her date and stopped by our table earlier. I overheard Madison first. "God, how do you do it? 5 years with a plumber. Does he still think you actually love him?" There was this pause, and then Sarah's response, crystal clear. "Please. His credit score is 810. The business made almost $500,000 last year, and he's too busy working to notice when I take weekend trips with Steven. Why would I walk away from that gravy train?" They both laughed, and Madison said something about, "At least he's not ugly." And Sarah replied, "True, but Mother was right. Marrying blue collar means he's always trying to prove himself. Makes him so easy to control. If I'd married someone like Robert, Madison's husband, a surgeon, he'd be watching the accounts like a hawk. Jake just hands over his Amex and thinks I'm supporting his career. It's adorable. I stood there, completely still. It wasn't even shock. More like final confirmation of something I'd suspected, but didn't want to admit. Every dismissive comment, every eye roll when I talked about work accomplishments I was proud of, every networking event that somehow never produced actual business connections, it all suddenly made perfect sense. My wife didn't love me. She was using me, and apparently cheating on me too. I walked back to the table, sat down, and finished my sparkling water while they wrapped up their little chat. Sarah rejoined me, completely oblivious. I drove us home in silence. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, annoyed. "It's our anniversary and you're being weird." "Just thinking about the Miller contract," I lied. "There's an issue with the supplier." She immediately lost interest. "Whatever. Don't forget we have the club fundraiser Saturday. I bought you a new suit. It's hanging in the closet. The black one you have looks cheap." That night, while she slept, I went through her phone. She used the same password for everything, her birth year plus her initials, so it wasn't hard to guess. Found texts to Madison about how exhausting it was, playing the supportive wife, and messages to someone saved as S, making plans for a weekend in Chicago while I was supposed to be at a job site in Grand Rapids. There were also emails between her and her parents discussing my business assets and how they were growing nicely. One from her dad saying, "Just 2 more years and the prenup limitation expires. Then you'll be set no matter what." Prenup limitation? We never signed a prenup. Then it hit me. They must have hidden something in those standard business protection documents her dad's lawyer had me sign before the wedding. I'd been so busy with a big job that I just skimmed them, trusted them. I barely slept. The next day, I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere. At lunch, I called Roy, my company's attorney. Asked him to meet urgently. Roy was an older guy who'd helped me set up my business structure years ago. One of the few professionals I'd hired before Sarah started upgrading my team. In Roy's cluttered office, I explained the situation, had him pull those documents from before the wedding. Sure enough, buried in legal jargon was basically a post-nup giving Sarah escalating percentages of my business after certain year milestones. After 7 years, she'd be entitled to 50% of everything, regardless of divorce circumstances. We were at 5 years, which meant she'd get 30% under current terms. "Christ, Jake," Roy said, removing his reading glasses. "This is predatory as hell. We might be able to challenge it on grounds of misrepresentation, but it'll be ugly." "What if there's evidence of infidelity?" I asked. "That would help. Michigan still considers that in property division." "You got something." "Working on it," I said. Next call was to Mike. "Remember that security company you did work for? The one with the ex-cop PI on staff? I need a favor." Mike didn't ask questions, just made the call. That afternoon, I met with Frank, a retired detective who now did PI work. I explained what I needed, paid his retainer from my personal emergency savings account, and put my phone on my desk. "Track this for now. I'll keep it with me but want to know where it goes when I'm not there." For the next 2 weeks, I pretended everything was normal. Went to work, kissed Sarah goodbye, told her I loved her. Meanwhile, Frank was documenting Sarah's every move. Turned out S was Stephen Winters, son of one of her dad's golf buddies, and recently divorced hedge fund manager. They'd been seeing each other for at least a year, meeting mostly at his downtown condo when I was out of town on jobs. Frank got photos, hotel receipts, even audio of them discussing their exit strategy, once Sarah hit the 7-year mark with me. "She's on the hook for 2 more years?" Stephen had asked. "Unfortunately," Sarah replied. "Daddy says that's when the agreement maxes out. After that, I get half of everything, even if we divorce." "And he has no idea?" Sarah laughed. "Jake's clueless. He thinks it's normal paperwork everyone signs. He was so desperate to prove himself worthy of me that he'd have signed anything." Their laughter made me physically sick when Frank played me the recording. Armed with this evidence, I met with Roy again, this time bringing along my financial advisor, Beth. Beth was one of the few professionals Sarah actually respected, mainly because Beth came from a wealthy family herself, but had built her own practice. What Sarah didn't know was that Beth had seen through her from day one and had been quietly advising me to protect my assets for years. We worked out a plan. First, I transferred 49% ownership of my business to a holding company controlled by Mike, completely legal as he'd been there from the start, and had the documentation to prove his sweat equity. This happened on paper only. Operationally, nothing changed, and we had a separate agreement that would transfer it back to me once everything was settled. Next, I moved our liquid assets to new accounts Sarah couldn't access. Then I had all my major clients sign updated contracts with the new company structure. I also quietly refinanced our house, which was in my name alone because Sarah's credit was surprisingly bad, despite her family's wealth, and took out $300,000 equity, which went to a separate account. On paper, this looked like business expenses for the new hotel contract. The final piece? I hired Jack, Madison's ex-boyfriend, who worked at their country club as a server. He'd always hated how Madison and Sarah treated service staff, calling them the rich bitch twins behind their backs. For $5,000 cash, he agreed to help with what I was planning. 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I told Sarah I had to fly to Chicago for an emergency job site issue. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown and waited. As predicted, she immediately called Steven. Frank recorded them meeting for dinner, then going to his penthouse. Meanwhile, at the country club charity gala, Jack made sure Richard and Catherine overheard him talking to another server about how Sarah's coming up on her big payday, and that poor bastard has no idea she's been cheating since year 2. Her parents, concerned about family reputation more than anything else, immediately called Sarah. Frank's surveillance caught her frantically assuring them everything's under control and Jake doesn't suspect anything. I didn't sleep that night. Not from sadness, but from a cold, calculating anger I'd never felt before. 5 years of my life. 5 years of working myself to exhaustion to fund a lifestyle I never even wanted, for a woman who saw me as nothing but a bank account and stepping stone. The next morning, while Sarah was still at Stevens, I came home and changed all the locks and security codes. Then, I had Roy send 3 sets of papers simultaneously, divorce filings to Sarah, at Stevens' address, which made her flip out when a process server showed up. There, a detailed letter to her parents outlining the fraud and conspiracy with copies of the evidence, and evidence packets to our social circle exposing everything. When Sarah couldn't get into the house, she called me screaming. I didn't answer. 3 hours later, she arrived with her father and a locksmith. They found me inside with Mike, Roy, and 2 police officers I'd called about trespassers attempting to break in. The look on Sarah's face when she realized she was locked out of her own house was worth every penny this mess would cost me. Her perfect blonde hair was a mess, her makeup smeared from crying, the designer outfit she'd been wearing since yesterday looking decidedly less perfect. But it was her eyes that got me, that moment of realization that she wasn't in control anymore. Her father tried pulling rank immediately. "This is ridiculous," Richard barked in that executive voice that probably intimidated everyone at his company. "Sarah, call the lawyer. We'll have an emergency hearing today." "Actually, sir," Roy spoke up, "the house is solely in Mr. Harrison's name. Mrs. Harrison has no legal right to access it without his permission." The cops, who I'd already briefed, and who happened to be plumbing customers, I'd redone both their bathrooms at mates' rates, just stood there, looking uncomfortable. "Jake, please," Sarah said, suddenly switching to a sweet, vulnerable voice I'd usually cave to. "This is all a misunderstanding. Let's talk inside like adults." "We have nothing to discuss," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice was. "My attorney has sent you divorce papers. You can have your clothing and personal items. I'll have them packed and you can pick them up with a police escort next week." Richard stepped forward, face reddening. "Now listen here, you little—" I cut him off. "Mr. Wilson, I've sent you a separate package of documents. Inside, you'll find evidence of how you, your wife, and your daughter conspired to defraud me through misrepresented legal documents. That's a felony in Michigan. There's also documentation of Sarah's 2-year affair with Stephen Winters, complete with photos, hotel receipts, and audio recordings of them discussing how to maximize what she could take from me." His face went pale. He was on the board of directors at his company and had political aspirations. A scandal like this would destroy him. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Would you like me to play the recordings right here?" I asked. "The ones where Sarah laughs about how I was desperate to prove myself worthy, so I'd sign anything? Or maybe the ones where she discusses using my credit cards to book hotel rooms to meet her boyfriend?" Sarah's face crumpled. "Jake, honey," her voice turned desperate. "You don't understand. Those things you heard? It was just girl talk. I was just trying to impress Madison." "And Stephen Winters?" I asked. "Was he just girl talk too?" She went white. That's not... The PI has over 40 hours of surveillance," I continued, "including footage from last night. Would you like to explain to your father what you were doing at Stephen's penthouse while I was supposedly in Chicago?" Richard looked at his daughter with shocked disgust. Apparently, cheating wasn't part of their master plan. "We can work this out," Richard said, switching to negotiation mode. "Everyone makes mistakes. There's no need to bring lawyers into a family matter." "We're not family," I replied. "We never were. I was an investment to you people. Nothing more." I turned to the officers. "These people are trespassing. I'd like them removed." As they were escorted off my property, Sarah turned back, tears streaking her makeup. "You'll regret this. You're nothing without me. My father will destroy your business. Your father is about to be very busy dealing with fraud charges and saving his own reputation," I called after her. "I suggest you start looking for a job. I hear the economy's tough right now. The next few weeks were chaos. Sarah tried everything. Tears, showing up at my office sobbing. Threats, leaving voicemails about how her father would ruin me. Pleading, emails about how she really did love me in her own way. And even showing up at job sites to make scenes in front of clients. Richard's expensive attorneys sent threatening letters, which Roy countered with our fraud evidence and recordings. Stephen Winters vanished the minute things got complicated. Apparently, Sarah wasn't worth the drama once the fun was over. Through it all, I kept working, kept my head down, and let the legal system do its thing. My clients, many of whom had met Sarah and seen through her act, were surprisingly supportive. Several even sent more business my way after hearing rumors of my situation. Then Sarah lost it completely. She showed up at my office, screaming about how I'd ruined her life and stolen her future. When my receptionist asked her to leave, Sarah shoved her and knocked over a display case with project photos and materials. That assault and property damage charge was the final nail in her coffin. The judge was unsympathetic to the teary socialite claiming poverty while wearing designer clothes to court. "Mrs. Harrison," he said during one hearing, "I'm struggling to understand how someone who's never contributed financially to this marriage feels entitled to half of a business she had no part in building." The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Thanks to the evidence of fraud and infidelity, the judge threw out the disguised prenup entirely. Sarah got only what she came into the marriage with, basically her clothes and personal items. No alimony, no property, nothing from the business. Her parents cut her off after the full story came out. Turns out they had no idea about Stephen. They were greedy, not okay with their daughter being unfaithful. Their reputation in their social circle was destroyed. Richard was asked to resign from his board position due to the scandal. Sarah ended up moving in with Madison, who dumped her 2 months later when Sarah couldn't contribute to rent. Last I heard, she was working as a sales associate at a furniture store making $14 an hour and living in a studio apartment. The country club crowd she desperately wanted to impress now treated her like she was invisible. About 6 months after everything settled, I got a text from Sarah's mom, Catherine, asking to meet. Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed. At a coffee shop downtown, she looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. "We made a terrible mistake," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Richard's had some health issues since everything. Our investment portfolio took a hit with the legal fees. We're having to sell the house." I just sipped my coffee, waiting. We've been talking to Sarah," she continued hesitantly. "She told us you were different than what we assumed, that you might be willing to help, given your Christian background. I'm not religious at all," showing how little they actually knew me after 5 years of marriage to their daughter. "Help how?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "Richard needs specialized treatment. Our insurance won't cover it all. We're talking about $200,000. We could pay you back once the house sells." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Let me get this straight. You helped your daughter defraud me, looked down on me for years because I work with my hands for a living, and now you want me to loan you $200,000? She had the decency to look ashamed. "I know how it sounds, but we're desperate. Richard's condition is serious." "So was I, when I was starting out," I said. "Crawling under houses in February, working 80-hour weeks, eating ramen for dinner. But instead of scheming and using people, I built something real. Maybe try that approach." I stood up. "I hope Richard recovers, I really do. But you people made your choices." I left her sitting there, pulled out my phone, and called Jen to tell her the whole story. We laughed until we cried. My business is now worth triple what it was during my marriage. I have 25 employees, contracts with major hotel chains and developers across 3 states, and just bought a building downtown for our headquarters. I drive a reasonable truck, live in a comfortable but not extravagant house, and date occasionally but nothing serious. Mike is now officially my business partner with real equity. No fake paper arrangements anymore. Beth, my financial advisor, and I have been seeing each other for a few months. Turns out she was the one who originally spotted the hidden clauses in those documents and saved my ass. Last week, I donated $50,000 to a program teaching financial literacy and basic contract law to high school students. The first lesson? How to read documents before you sign them. Sometimes I think about Sarah and almost feel sorry for her. Almost. Then I remember her laughing about using me, and suddenly I'm okay again. The most expensive lesson I ever learned cost me 5 years of my life and about $600,000 in lifestyle inflation and legal fees. But knowing she and her family got exactly what they deserved, totally worth it. TLDR. Wife married me for money, had a secret agreement to get half my business after 7 years, cheated on me with a rich guy, and got caught. I used PI evidence to blow up her plan, saved my business, and now she's working retail while her parents are begging me for money. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the awards and comments. To answer some common questions: 1. Yes, I reported the lawyers who created the fraudulent documents to the state bar. They're under investigation. 2. No, I didn't press criminal charges ultimately. The public humiliation and financial consequences seemed like enough punishment. 3. For those asking about Beth, yes, we're still together, and it's going great. She's actually the one who suggested the financial literacy donation. 4. And yes, I changed the locks on my truck too, not just the house.